Okay, the last topic of this semester is NoSQL database. So at the end of this topic, you should be able to summarize the 4 major approaches of NoSQL data model and how they are differ from the relational model. Okay, and when we talk about the NoSQL, it is actually usually associated with the big data. So in terms of big data is consists of 3 V's, okay, volume, velocity, and also variety. So what are these 3 V's? Okay, first is the volume. Volume is actually, okay, first is the volume. Volume is the quantity of data to be stored. Okay, so in terms of volume, we have scaling up and also the scaling out. So the scaling up is on how you want to keep the same numbers of the system, but you will be migrating each one to the larger system. And scaling out is when the workload exceeds the server's capacity, that it will spread out across the number of servers. Okay, and then in terms of the velocity as the speed at which data is entered into the system and it must be processed. So in terms of the velocity, we have two components that is associated with the velocity. First is the stream processing. So in terms of stream processing, it will focus on the input processing and it requires analysis of data stream as it enters the system. And secondly, we have the feedback loop processing, whereby it will analyze the data to produce the actionable results. And lastly, we have the third V is the variety. So which is the variations of the structure of data to be stored. So in terms of the structure of data, it is categorized into 2, which is structured data. So the structured data will fit into the predefined data model. And secondly is the unstructured data. So the unstructured data, it cannot be fit into the predefined model. Okay. So the other characteristics of big data is the variability, whereby it will changes in the meaning of database on contact. Okay, and then we have the sentimental analysis, which is the attempt to determine if the statement conveys a positive, negative, or neutral attitude about the topic. We have also veracity, on how you can trust, okay, your data, the value, the degree data that can be analyzed for the meaningful insight, and also the visualization, which is the ability to graphically present your data to make it understandable. So relational database, it is not necessarily the best for storing and managing all the organizational data. Okay, you can actually opt for the NoSQL database as well. So in the NoSQL, it is a non-relational database that is to address the big data challenges. Okay, so there are 4 major approaches, which is key value database, document database, column-oriented database, and also graph database. So you can basically choose on which one is the most suitable whenever you want to do the NoSQL database. Okay, firstly, we have the key value database. So it is actually the simplest of NoSQL. So it can store your data in terms of the collection of the key value pairs, and it is organized as the buckets, okay, which are equivalent of the table. So buckets is also in relational we call it table, okay. And then secondly, we have document database. So it is it is also considered the subtype of the key value database, whereby it will store the key value pairs. Okay, it is also same as the key value, which is in terms of pairs. Okay, and then but the differences is that the value components are the encoded documents. Okay, and then we call it the collections. Okay, and thirdly, we have also the column oriented. So there are 2 technologies into column oriented. First is the column centric, okay, whereby you store the data. The data is stored in terms of the block, and then this block will hold actually the data from the single column of across many rows. Okay, and then we have the row centric storage. So for the row centric, okay, same like the column, the data will be stored, we call it in the block, okay? And this block will hold data from all of the columns in the given set of rows. Okay, lastly is the graph database. So graph database is focusing more on the relationship of data, and then it is in terms of the collection of nodes and edges. So the attributes is called property in the graph database, and then these are what we stored them in the nodes, okay? And then the traversal is actually the query. We call it also query, but in this graph database we call it the traversal. Okay, here's the example on how you store on how it is written in your database. First is the key value database. Okay, as the explanation here, you store your data in terms of key and values. Okay, so the key is the unique numbers. Okay, and then the value is actually the tables. Okay, that you are inserting into your database. Okay, secondly is the document database. So the document database is actually also the subtype, which means it also have the same representation of the key value, which is in pairs, key and values, but the differences in the document database that it is in terms of key and also document. So when you write in the column here, okay, the document is representation of all the tables on how it is written. It is written in the tag format. Okay, and this is the column-oriented database. Okay, so the column-oriented database, for example, here you have the relational database. So what does it mean? Is the row-centric storage is whereby the data is stored in the blocks. Okay, so for the row-centric, it will take on the whole rows. So it will be called row 1. And then the second row will be called row 2. So this is how it is represented in the row-centric storage. And vice versa to that, it is column centric storage, whereby it will take only the columns. So each columns will be given name as block 1, block 2, block 3, block 4, and block 5. Okay. And lastly is the graph database representation. So graph database is represented is more focusing on the relationship. So if you can look in this example, it is more on nodes and also edges. Okay, so the nodes is basically entering on all of the entities that you and also the attributes that you are written, okay, you are having in your relational. Okay, and then it is relating on each of the nodes, okay, by having the edges. Okay, so basically these are the relationships between each nodes. Okay, all right, so that is all about the NoSQL examples. Okay, so basically in a summary, big data is characterized by the data. Okay, so you can the characteristic of data nowadays is more in terms of the volume, the velocity, or the variety that the relational model struggles to adapt to it. So velocity, variety, and also volume is referred to the 3 V's of the big data. And NoSQL is very broad, okay, and it is referring to any several non-relational database approach to data management. So basically, the key value database will store the data in the key value pairs. Okay, the document database will store the data in key value pairs, but the value are in the encoded document. Okay, the column-oriented database, or we call it the column family database, will organize the data in the key value pairs, whereby it will be composed of the series of the columns, and which are themselves are also the key value pairs. And the graph database are basically based on the graph theory and represented data through nodes, edges, and also the properties. And each of these also have been represented in the relational model only in the different representation. Okay, So that's it for our topic for this semester. I hope you gain something from this topic, and I see you again in see you in class. Okay, thank you.